as a child moves through life, we have different lessons that we have to learn. If we come in this innocent, curious, unjaded child that just wants to be loved and feel safe, they're not going to have anything to compare and contrast to. So every negative look, every lash out verbally that they hear from a parent is going to feel intensely traumatizing and scary because they can't yet say, oh, well, that's not as bad as this time. They don't have that ability to compare and contrast yet. Everything feels like the deepest, hardest wound that they've ever experienced. So when we talk about childhood trauma, every single one of us has childhood trauma, and it doesn't need to fit some sort of guidepost that we would think of in kind of a more modern mental health sense, because we're this soft little spirit-filled creature. Anything negative is going to feel traumatizing, especially in the earliest years. So those sort of early childhood trauma imprints start to shape who we become and how we see the world. So that will be a byproduct of our repetitive early childhood adversely perceived experiences. So we have to perceive it as negative, but it also has to be repetitive. And I think this is something that I see people miss quite a bit is, people that are doing emotional work, they will decide I'm this way because, and then they have their because story. Because my dad left, because I got molested. And more often than not, they're talking about singular events, right? Singular traumatic events, like this one time this happened. The reality is that our brain is actually formulated and shaped by the repetitive events, not the one-time events. So the one time that maybe mom and dad got into a horrific physical fight and then dad left when I was 7, my brain pattern would have already been formed by then. So I need to understand what lens of glass I have in, because that would have been how I perceived the 7-year-old trauma. So without understanding the brain pattern that preceded it, we can't even really understand that story or that memory accurately, because we saw that as a 7-year-old through a distortion. So to go back and kind of get to that data, that truth, we have to know how to reverse engineer it. And that reverse engineering process is ultimately what we do in Break Method, is really understanding how am I seeing the world through distortion, and how can I learn to take that off so that I can see things more as they are, more objectively. Because as you can imagine, when you do that, collaboration becomes very easy to do, because I no longer see your perspective that's different from mine as oppositional to mine. I understand how it's possible. And it would be like, imagine a physical map, right? Like a topographical map. If I know where you are on the map and I know where I am on the map, now we know how to get to each other. Most people don't know where they are, and I don't know where you are. So how are we ever going to walk toward each other on the map if we don't know where we are?
Yeah, you have firsthand experience in this. I think in the book you said as a child you were all about managing other people's emotions at some point. What age was that for you where you learned, oh, this is a strategy where I can manage other people so that I feel safe? Do you remember when that was?
It started very early. I was always placed in this role of peacekeeper, mediator, keep people happy with jokes. And then, of course, your familial situations start to pile on, right? Then my parents do split up, and they do utilize me in the middle to pass messages back and forth, to try to hurt each other with me always in the middle. And it was just my nature to try to shield my little sister from it. So my little sister, as a byproduct, has a very different brain pattern than I do. I shielded her, and my parents were much more likely to placate her or coddle her because she's the baby. She's the baby. And this happens honestly a lot to the second born, especially if babies are close. It's like you try to overdo it and overcompensate for the other one. Like, we don't want to make them feel bad. And typically in that overcompensation, you actually set your kid up for a negative outcome rather than a positive outcome.
So when you went deep into yourself, and obviously you can't teach what you yourself haven't been through. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about adversity. You actually can become such a powerful teacher if you really go into the depth of the adversity. What did you learn the most out of that pattern that you used to exhibit? And how did that learning really shape the mapping and the technology that you're using now? There's a gift there.
I've been skilled at pattern recognition my whole life, and it is something that is a byproduct of the brain pattern type that I have on the spectrum. Let's look at the spectrum divided into those left and right halves, because I think it's important for people to kind of give themselves a reference point. Like we were talking about the map, it's kind of hard to talk about something conceptually. I'd rather people know, where are we? Let's all locate each other on the map. So if you start in the middle of the spectrum and you were to hash it out, let's say 20 clicks to the left, every step that you take to the left, your self-trust is going up. Your situational awareness is also going up. So every step you go to the left, you're more acutely aware of what's happening around you. So you're very aware of your surroundings and you trust yourself more. One of the byproducts of self-trust is going to be hyper-independence. If I trust myself but not other, I'm more likely to do things on my own, right? Look to myself first. We also see, as you start to hash out to that left side, people become more career and purpose-driven. And career and purpose-driven typically means that relational conflict can be very high. If we're very driven by something outside and we've got this like purpose and drive and we're willing to push ourselves, be very committed, that is typically antagonistic to intimate relationships, right? Because the other person wants to be chosen. They want to be the priority. So there already is inherently this split where the left side tends to be very career driven and, let's be honest, tends more toward workaholism as the way to make themselves feel centered. Another thing that can happen, as you can imagine, if you go all the way out to the left, if you have the highest level of self-trust and you are extremely situationally aware, what is something that you think could happen to you?
Hyper control.
You become more controlling, but at the very far left side, you can become paranoid because you don't know, you're taking in so much information at a high level from your environment and you trust everything that you've noticed. So you can't separate out what to take action on or not anymore. So as you move out to that left side, you become more controlling and eventually you get to a place where you start to become paranoid. Now, let's go back to the center, fan out to the right, because the opposite things are true here. So as you start to hash out to the right, your self-trust goes down, your situational awareness goes down, but your focus on relational inputs goes up. So you start to become fixated on what others are thinking about you, which is, of course, a projection. We don't know that. I'm not in your head. I can make a good assumption or a hypothesis of what I think you're thinking about me, but I'll never be 100% accurate. And most people are like 1% accurate, right? Because it's typically a projection of their own insecurity. So the people that are on this right side of the spectrum become more and more fixated on what the world thinks about them and what others are thinking and feeling. So as you can imagine, kind of going back to this example of kind of collective knowledge, the people to the right are very likely to be reaching outside of themselves to learn. What am I missing? Right? Because they're putting everyone other than themselves up on this hypothetical pedestal of knowing more than they do. And their discernment is typically very low because they don't trust themselves and they're immediately giving away that authority and agency to other. The people on the left, I believe that human beings have the ability to grab information off of like the multidimensional internet, right? Like it doesn't have to exist in a book for us to learn it and know it, right? That's on that kind of like collective consciousness level. The people on the left are very likely, if they're able to heal emotionally, to pull those files off the internet left and right? That's where intuition can really take root because the self-trust is there. And if they can heal just enough emotionally, that intuitive hit or that contact with the multidimensional internet can start to come through and you're pulling knowledge that transcends the physical world. But if you're on the right side, you're really leaning into knowledge of the world. You're looking for the expert and maybe not the spiritual expert, but you have to have the credentials. You have to have the letters behind your name, right? Everything is very of the world and very restrictive. So these two groups of people operate in the world together all the time. And they frequently end up in relationships together. That's one of the phenomenons that I've experienced over the course of my career that I call symbiotic dysfunction. As you can imagine, these two different types of people, they see the world very differently and they take very different actions based on whatever they think they're perceiving. And this is essentially the birthplace of toxicity.
If you love that video, you'll love the one on the screen right now. Click the one on the screen and enjoy.